Good morning. I know that Senator Lang has a prime bill at this time, so we will open the hearing, and we've got the prime sponsor right there, and well, let him introduce himself and the bill.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Senator Keith Murphy, representing the people of District 16. You may recall last November on Election Day, there were some widespread media reports of a community that had lengthy lines to vote, lengthy lines, to the point that people were waiting over an hour. And some voters were reportedly discouraged enough by the length of that wait that they walked away or they drove away. A difficulty getting into the parking lot, into the building, through the process. So this bill is a very simple bill, maybe the most simple bill you deal with this year, which essentially says that for general elections in presidential years, a town or city shall have a minimum of one polling place for every 20,000 registered voters, unless a plan to accommodate more than that with one location has been submitted to and approved by the Secretary of State. So it's simply an effort to ensure that voters have an appropriate opportunity to get to the polls and cast their ballots. I'm happy to take questions, but the Secretary of State is behind me, and I think he intends to speak.
All right, thank you very much. Questions from the senator? All right, seeing none.
Thank you.
Secretary of State, did you want to go now, or did you want to wait to sum up?
I'm happy to go now, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm David Scanlon, Secretary of State, here in support of Senate Bill 103. New Hampshire has the smallest polling places in the country. Most of them are in the North Country, but it also has the largest. It's kind of a neat thing to have, to be able to say that, we've got the largest polling place in the entire country. But along with that comes some significant responsibilities in terms of being able to make sure that we can move voters through the polling places. I think everybody experienced the incredibly high voter turnout, a record turnout in the last general election, which did create lines at almost every polling place. Some of them were too long. And we need to implement some strategies to be able to shorten those lines and expedite the process of voting so that voters don't have to wait in line too long to exercise that right to vote. So what Senator Murphy has proposed is one strategy to deal with that, and that is to reduce the number of voters that go through a single polling place by requiring additional polling places if the population reaches a certain point. And there would be an exception that if the town submits a plan to the Secretary of State, and it would probably be a good idea to add the Attorney General to that as well. But if there is a plan that makes sense and talks about how the process of voting will be expedited on that day, that there would be a waiver granted to that town. And so that allows a town to maintain the notoriety of being the largest in the country, but at the same time, we are cognizant of the concerns about moving voters through in an orderly and efficient manner. The number 20,000 in the bill, I think, is a starting point. When the committee has some discussions, you may decide to lower that. I think the 20,000 number affects maybe 4, 5, or 6 towns in the state. Cities are not affected because they are all broken down into wards. So the number of voters in a particular polling place is already quite a bit lower than that 20,000 number. You might determine 15,000 is appropriate or 12,000, but 20,000 is the starting point. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee? I certainly have. Oh, Senator Perkins Cook, you first.
I'm happy to defer to the chair.
That's fine.
Thank you, Secretary. So you're mentioning that essentially, in order to address the delays, which you agree is a concern, this may be one way to do it. What would be some other ways to address any possible delays out there?
We could require that towns have a certain number of ballot counting machines. If there's a bottleneck at that point, we could, many towns now are going to electronic poll books, which is speeding up the process. But, if they don't have enough of those, then that's a limiting factor. So I think we have to look at the technology and making sure that when technology is used in the polling place, that it is properly scaled for the voting population.
Thank you.
Certainly in existing law, we require a certain number of booths, for the voters. Certainly, one of the options might be that, unless they can provide the parking, because parking is one of those things that has caused us great problems in the past, then instead of limiting it by that, if we limit it by saying you have to provide parking, one spot for every 100 people on the list, or 10, whatever the number is, would that be an alternate strategy that could be effective?
Well, I think so. I think certainly parking is an issue. Training is an issue. And, there's constantly turnover in the election officials in any given polling place. And we have to help the moderators in particular identify, what are the choke points in your process, and then train them in ways to resolve them. So clearly, this is, again, one way to address this concern, but generally, we have to look at the whole issue and come up with a
Even
plan.
though none of the polling places that I represent, would fall under this category, there were significant lines in the people that were trying to register. And this doesn't really get to that, but your ideas, either now or in the future, on how to treat this as a holistic problem, would be helpful. So.
Yeah. And that's a great point. I went around on the day of the general election. I saw the lines. I saw the lines moving. I went to Durham, which registers a very large number of voters on the day of the election, and that process was actually operating incredibly smoothly. They had plenty of stations set up for registration, so there was not a bottleneck there, and the process moved well. So, I think there's a lot of election management strategies that we have to take a look at. We are having a retreat for moderators. We actually have several sessions planned within the next 2 to 3 weeks, and we're going to be talking about these issues with the moderators to get their input on what they think will work in helping with these issues. So it's hopefully by 2026, we'll do a much better job at moving crowds.
Additional questions from senators? Yes, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this bill proposes 20,000 registered voters. Is there a number where you see this starting to happen? Is it 15,000? Is it 18,000?
Probably closer to 15,000. There were some towns much smaller than that $20,000 threshold, 20,000 voter threshold, that were experiencing severe problems in terms of lines.
Okay.
And then there were others of similar size, and the voters were moving through, very smoothly. So, this is going to be a package deal addressing the problem. This one bill is not going to resolve it by itself.
Very good. Thank you.
Just on that, I've been to, I think it was Derry about 5-6 years ago, and because of the ample parking they had, the multiple entrances, at the gymnasium, the way the gymnasium was set up, certainly I believe in their situation, when you look at it holistically, they did a very good job of getting the people through. But when you combine that, and that's why I mentioned the parking and other things, that, it starts to become a problem And the idea of having a waiver, may be applicable to that situation. So, but we are going to hear from the dairy clerk here in a second. So unless there's another question for the secretary, we'll let him go and
Thank you.
bring up.
Good morning, Senators. My name is Tina Gilbert. I'm the Derry Town Clerk. Prior to being the Town Clerk, I was the Town Moderator, and prior to that, I was just a regular election worker. Been involved in elections in Derry since 2015. We've had one polling place, we've had two polling places, we've had three polling places. Regardless of the number of polling places, we have had traffic. If you're not familiar with Derry, we have a rotary, and for some reason, people don't quite know how to drive in that rotary. We actually have a video camera you can watch live to see all sorts of things like people going the wrong way. So we had one polling place in 2024. We currently have almost 22,000 people on our checklist. We had 18,148 voters on election day. We had 22 poll pads in use. We had 28 assistant supervisors of the checklist voter registration stations. We have almost 1,400 parking spots for voters, not counting the parking spots for our poll workers and other staff. We had 154 poll workers throughout the day. We had numerous police. We had a fire detail all day. We had quite a bit in place. Other than when we first opened at 7 a.m., my already registered voters did not wait more than 15 or 20 minutes once they had parked their car to vote. And the average voter was inside the polling place about 8 minutes. There were some traffic issues. I think some residents forgot that we were voting that day and kind of went the way they always do because there were no traffic issues in the evening. They remembered on their way home to avoid the Pinkerton Academy area. Like I said, we did have multiple polling places. In fact, one of the issues that we run into in a town is that you have one elected town clerk and you have one elected moderator. And I was actually running a polling place in 2018 before I was elected to anything. And I actually had some state reps at the time call me an unelected stooge. Because I was running a polling place and they didn't vote for me. And that was actually something that a lot of Derry residents had a problem with. And I understand. See, in cities, they have wards. And in wards, they elect ward moderators and ward clerks and ward selectmen. It makes it easier to do multiple polling places. I will tell you that in Derry, other than where we vote now, we really don't have any schools with more than about 120 parking spots. We really don't have a lot of places where we can vote. We do have a church that we used in 2022, and again, we had no lines, no waiting inside, but we had a lot of traffic because the road that it's on is only one way in and one way out. So it definitely is not really a great location for a lot of voters. I am kind of upset that you're trying to kind of push towns into having multiple polling places, into spending funds that towns may not want to spend. However, I do think that, doing something about parking spaces and check-in stations is definitely something that could be done. I know another town not far from us had way longer lines and they had a lot less check-in stations. And I think a lot of their problems could have been alleviated by having more. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions from committee members? I guess not.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And the last one on this copy of the list is Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senators. My name is Dave Nelson. I am the Derry Town Moderator. I'm not going to repeat much of what our town clerk said. I endorse it, and it's all true. As moderator, I want to make sure that everyone has a good experience voting, can vote expeditiously. I don't want to see anyone ever be discouraged and turn away. I think in our town, the biggest problem is traffic, because parking is not a problem at the one place we use. Getting in and out is not a problem. Our technology is up to snuff. So it's really the local road network and educating voters as to one-way closures in order to control traffic flow, to make sure that they're aware of those. I don't think that having a second place in Derry would necessarily help, because as the clerk indicated, other places we have used in the past either have poorer road access networks or far less parking. And so I'm willing to do anything that we can reasonably do to make voting quicker, but I'm not sure that simply opening up a second spot will help. And as the clerk indicated, that means that I have to hire additional staff, qualified staff, to run two places, and that is also something of a challenge. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I will take any questions.
Questions from the senators? Senator Perkins Boga.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So obviously, we all share the goal of voters voting quickly and expeditiously. It sounds like you've gone to great effort in Derry to make that happen. Are you saying this bill could result in additional costs to the taxpayers to accomplish a goal you guys are already accomplishing?
Yeah, I'm concerned it will require us to hire more staff, train more staff. But I'm mostly concerned that because of what our unique bottlenecks are, I'm not sure that having another place, given the choices we have in Derry that are large enough to be a second polling place, will actually make a substantial difference in terms of the traffic flow.
Follow up if I may.
Certainly.
Do you use electronic poll books in Derry?
We do. We have electronic ballot devices, and we use electronic poll books.
Follow up if I may. Chair?
Absolutely.
Are you seeing poll books contribute to a lower wait time in
Yes,
Derry?
definitely. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Nelson, and Ms. Guilford. Thank you for the responsibilities you take. I was sort of blown away by the numbers of people that are helping you in Derry. And I do agree in your case, you're doing all that's possible and what we expect. The only issue would be traffic, which this bill doesn't really address. And I sort of agree that another location may not reduce in that traffic. I know I'll be looking at traffic as one of the issues. Being from Manchester, I was blown away by the numbers you were giving us of how many people help you. Something I couldn't even fathom. So the fact that it's just traffic is the problem. And you do have police that you hire to try to negate that. I'm thinking that, either the possibility of a waiver, which I'm not sure that a waiver would be granted, but I'll be looking at that because, like you said, opening up another location would be problematic. It would cost more in training and manning the other locations. So thank you for your testimony.
Thanks,
So-
Senator.
Senator.
Mr. Chairman. So the way I read the bill, if this were to pass as is, dairy probably wouldn't be affected at all. The testimony that you provided and the testimony that we heard previously, you guys are doing a good job and people are moving through and you're happy with the way things are going. So I look at lines 6 and 7 where I would imagine then that if it was sort of passed, you would submit a plan to the Secretary of State and have that waiver that my colleague just mentioned. So would you agree with that?
Yes, Senator. We would certainly submit a request and a plan, should the legislation pass as it's written. And hopefully, it would be granted at least, in the near future. We don't know what's going to happen down the road, and there may be other bills to address other issues. So without having any objective standards, we would just submit the plan and request a waiver and hope for the best.
Follow up?
Thank you. So are you comfortable with the wording now that would, are you comfortable that the wording that's in the bill as stated would give you, are you comfortable with that, the wording that's in the bill now, are you comfortable of your prospects that a waiver would be granted, or would you be looking for more objective standards of granting a waiver?
I have faith in the, the judgment of the Secretary of State or the Attorney General if they get involved to hear us out and be reasonable with granting waivers. So I guess I would remain optimistic, Senator.
Additional questions? Seeing none, I think they just checked to see if there's any more sheets. Is there anyone here that didn't sign up that wants to testify or did sign up and I haven't got the sheet yet? Seeing none, okay, there was one additional person who signed the sheet here, did not wish to speak, but opposes the bill. And online, there were 25 who support the bill, 0 that oppose the bill. And we'll recess this, close this hearing, and we will open the next one in just a minute. Got to protect yourself. You need that. And I have a habit of stealing them. When you're ready. Okay. And the next bill is Senate Bill 104. Oh, Senator Avard.
Thank you, Senator. For the record, I'm Senator Kevin Avard, District 12, prime sponsor of SB 104. And very simple bill. The bill basically it just requires the performance of a machine count at the request of 10 residents who have cast ballots in the election. Nothing more complicated than that. I know that we do random, I know the Secretary of State does random audits. I believe there were 8 this past time. Bedford, Hudson, Laconia, Manchester, Somersworth, Walpole, Moulton Borough, and Rochester, Ward 2. And I believe the system is working, but at a request of one of my constituents, they just want to have basically a say in possibly audits of their polling machines. And so on his behalf and on their behalf, I'm bringing in this bill. Open to any amendments if you want to change it from 10 registered voters to as many as you'd like. But that's basically the essence of this bill.
Questions from senators?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senator. So I know you also have brought SB 44 relative to hand counts of ballots in elections. Could you talk to us about the difference between these two bills? Because I think we heard in that hearing that there were concerns about, having the citizens kind of bring a petition for a recount, having municipal staff conduct that recount, not having a standard for that recount, needing to train officials to conduct the recount, how it interacted with the audit timeline. This bill doesn't even seem to have a timeline. So I was wondering if you can kind of address why there's 2 pieces of legislation and how we can sort of tackle those issues raised in hearing.
Well, I think to keep it as simple as possible, I think that they basically want the ability for the Secretary of State to either come in and do this within a timely fashion if they have enough signatures, so that if they have concerns with their particular voting machines, then they would request that an audit would happen there as well. As far as the timeline, I would imagine within the same time frame as the Secretary of State's office does already.
Okay. Thank you, Senator.
Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I may get this all wrong. However, these are to be verified before 10 a.m. on election day. Are those counting ballots closed for voters? Has this happened?
I'm not really sure. I think the Secretary of State would have a better
I'll ask
answer to that, but it
Okay.
would be the same type of performance as with all these other towns that they do at random. So I'm thinking that the town wants to be, if they have concerns that would kind of jumpstart the the random audit and say, hey, look over here, please.
Okay,
That's basically what we're doing.
thank you.
The way I read that is that the request needs to be submitted and verified before 10 a.m. Is that fair? And
Yes.
I have a question, if no one else is. The current process for authorizing the machine goes through the governing body, whether that's a vote of the town or a vote of the city council, whatever. Why should two people in the town be able to overturn that vote?
I don't understand why two specific election ballots.
It's 10 people, excuse me.
Yeah. Because they have concern, I guess.
Would allowing a person to request a hand count of their individual ballot satisfy yourself and someone who asked you to put this in?
Well, we already know that's allowed, from what I understand, right?
Not exactly,
Well,
no.
if you ask for a recount.
I can talk more about that in executive session, but right now,
Well, the number of 10 registered voters, I don't know if that was a typo, but I thought we had requested for more or less 100, but prior to the election, but the number itself, 10 registered voters if they have concerns and they voted in that particular election. If they have doubts for some reason, trying to give them the ability to have faith in their voting machines.
okay. Any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And Secretary of State, you're also on this one. Do you want to testify now or at the end?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, I'm David Scanlon, Secretary of State. And like the other bill that you heard last week, I believe, I have concerns about this one as well. That there are no, first of all, the Secretary of State in the statute is the only one that is authorized to conduct recounts. And when we do that, we have uniform standards in a controlled setting to make sure that everybody's ballot is being counted in a uniform way. In this bill, there are no standards for how a recount would be conducted at the local level, which would lead me to have concerns about the integrity of the ballots that were cast in that election if the state had to end up receiving them for the purposes of an official recount. The other concern that I have in this bill is that on the last, actually on lines 17 and 18, if the verification results are found to deviate by plus or minus 0.2% from the machine count, all races on the ballot shall be hand counted. Effectively, what that does is forces a hand count of every race on the ballot, because at 0.2% is 2 votes per 1,000 votes cast. And if you have been to a recount, you know that the machine will only count the ballots that are properly marked. And we always see movement of a number of votes, difference between a machine count and a recount in most instances. So my expectation is it would be far more likely than not that you will meet that deviation, forcing a hand count of the entire ballot after the election. So that's all I have to say on that bill. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Just of a clarification of that point, if a person comes in and votes for Charlie Finaris on the ballot and then writes in Charlie Finaris, fills in both oval, then that ballot would be marked as an overvote. And therefore, if 2 or 3 people, did that, then it would cause that 0.2%. Is that correct?
That's correct. Sometimes voters will not fill in the oval. They might circle the candidate's names. It takes a human to determine what the voter intent was on that ballot. I've seen visually impaired individuals that have come in and through whatever lens they're looking through, they miss the oval in a consistent way all the way down the ballot. And if the mark is not made in the oval, the machine is not going to count that vote, even though it's clear what the voter wanted to do with that ballot.
Additional questions? Senator Polk?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Secretary. So in part, what I think I heard you say was that without standards for the municipal staff to conduct a recount, we actually, instead of creating a more secure election, could potentially create a less secure election through this procedure.
That's my concern.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator
Chair.
Burke.
And I don't know the answer to this question, that's why I'm asking it. But back in November, when prior to the election, it was probably the end of October, actually, in Littleton, there was a public notice put out to the community. The town was going to test our vote counting machines. Is that standard throughout all the communities that use vote counting machines, that they're publicly demonstrated ahead of the election to be accurate?
The state statutes require that ballot counting devices used in election must be tested before the election begins. And the state provides sample ballots for that purpose. And the local election officials are instructed to mark the ballots in different ways so that they can determine that every candidate on the ballot will receive the vote. They count those ballots by hand to make sure that the hand count matches the machine count. And then the machine is zeroed out to be put into service on the day of the election. I will say that the legislature, with our encouragement, is also moving towards more thorough audits of the ballot counting devices that are used in an election. I expect that is going to become more rigorous as time goes on. One of the new ballot counting devices that was approved by the Ballot Law Commission, which is now being put into service and has been used recently in elections, uses open source software so that anybody that has the technical ability and the desire can look at the code to see how it was counting, how it was programmed to count the ballots. So we are constantly moving in the direction of being transparent and taking measures, hopefully, to give confidence that the elections that we conduct are in fact sound.
Follow up. So one could conceivably come to the conclusion that the verification that's being asked for in this legislation is already being done ahead of the elections uniformly.
It is being done in a responsible, uniform, and a more aggressive way. That, I mean, we know this is an issue and we want transparency. We want people to have confidence in the election process. I certainly understand the people that question what happens in that machine. That is not a really transparent part of the process. And when it is not, people can think things that may or may not be true. And we have to continue to take measures to improve that confidence.
Thank you.
Just a clarifying question for a couple of things, I guess. The audits that are done before, one of the reasons for doing the audits after is that a routine could be tied in with the the clock or the date that on the machine, and therefore perform fine in the pre-count, but not perform fine on election day. And that is one of the reasons for the after election. Is that correct?
Yes. And I will add, in addition to that, we do have a good process. It starts with a pretest of the machines. We have election day. The moderator has authority, if they believe that something went wrong with the count, to get to the bottom of it. There's a lot of discretion there. And then after the election is over, it is easy to request a recount in New Hampshire. If there's disagreement on how ballots were interpreted, there's an appeal process to the Ballot Law Commission, where you have a board that makes decisions by majority vote. And then there are the courts that people can go to for resolution of issues. So we do have a pretty thorough process in being able to vet issues that come up on election day.
Additional questions, clearing up testimony from Senator Avard. Is there a provision in state law that a person can request that their ballot be hand counted?
No. Currently, the law says that if a town decides to use a ballot counting device, then that device will be used in the election.
Are you aware that people are marking their ballots with overvotes to ensure that their ballot is hand counted, because all overvotes are hand counted?
I am aware of that, yes.
Additional questions from anyone? Senator Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary of State. Now, all these required testing, are they public information?
They are public events. They are to be advertised before they take place. And to the extent that minutes are kept of that event, then those are public records.
Okay, so I could follow up if I may. So I could inquire either with my clerk or the moderator the results of the testing that was done.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no additional questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. I guess we'll go right to you, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senators. I'm Dave Nelson. I'm Town Moderator for Derry. I think the Secretary of State has eloquently expressed all of my concerns, with perhaps except for one. The way I read this is that if the request is duly received and validated before 10 a.m., then after the machine is closed and voting has ended, but before tabulation can begin, we have to conduct basically an audit of two races. My concern is that that can be a complicated process. We would need additional guidance and procedures to do that. I'm not sure, given all the other safeguards on the accuracy of these machines, that it really adds a lot of confidence to their accuracy and effectiveness. But my main concern is it makes the tabulation at the end of the night even longer. In Derry, for our presidential election, we didn't complete tabulation until 3 a.m. One of the problems with that is that humans make more mistakes when they're extremely tired. So some of those workers were working all day. Some of them were brought in fresh for the counting. But I don't think that the potential small advantage that can be obtained by inserting these audits in line, real time on election day, countervails the risks of extending the count period and using people to do it who are even more tired. Thank you. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank
Dan
you.
Healy?
Good morning, Senators. Dan Healy, Nashua City Clerk. A lot of my points have been mentioned by others. The Secretary of State does random audits of the tabulators after the election. The prime sponsor mentioned that he'd be amenable to changing the threshold. I would suggest if this bill does move forward, that instead of 10 voters, that you would do a percentage, which would be more in line with the different size communities if there was a percentage instead of 10 voters. In Nashua, some of my wards have 7,000 voters. I would say getting 10 people would be a relatively easy task. And then that draws me to my next point. New Hampshire is a continuous state with election results. You have to get your results that day. You can't go home until you're done. A few years ago, there was an issue in another community and they had to stay until 6 or 7 in the morning, putting the ballots back through the tabulator. So I see an issue here. If we're before my wards can even begin getting their official results for that election, if they have to hand count 2 races, that's going to add a couple hours at minimum before they can then begin the process. And for the general election, my last ward reported about 3 a.m. And I left the office about 3:30 in the morning. So you're adding on a couple hours to that. You might run into issues too with the schools, the availability. We use some cafeterias and we use the gyms at the schools. So the election staff might end up being in the polling location the following morning when kids are coming to the schools because of the amount of work that they have to do. We had a recount for a local race. It was a pick 5 with 8 candidates with 20 teams. It took 9 hours to hand count that one race. So that's just an example of, maybe the time that it's going to take to hand count. I'm not really opposed to the intent to try to verify the results, I think, but we have things in place already that do that with the audits, with the testing prior, with recounts. So I would be opposed to this bill, and I'd be open to any questions.
Questions from senators? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tina?
Good morning again. My name is Tina Guilford. I'm the Derry Town Clerk. One of my biggest issues with this bill is that during your last session, you guys put in a rule that within 60 minutes of running the last ballot through the machine, the results need to be on the wall. If we have to stop and we have to count 2 races and we have to do all of this, then there's no way we could put the results on the wall in 60 minutes. Even if we go by one ballot counting device and we're only counting it on one particular device. For example, in November, we had 8 devices, 18,000 divided out, a couple of thousand each, 2 races. It doesn't, it says that they get to pick. We have a pick 10, which is very complicated to hand count. And try hand counting that and making it tie out, and you end up there until 3 a.m. So I think that that's what recounts are for. That's what the audits after the election are for. And I will say in regards to the testing before the election, we very rarely have anyone come. We publicly notice them, we put it out there, and people just don't come. I've only had, since I've been clerk, one person come to look at the testing results. And that was a candidate on the ballot who just wanted to know. So I'll take any questions.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Olivia?
Good morning. I'm Olivia Zink, a voter in Franklin, New Hampshire, and representing Open Democracy, a nonpartisan nonprofit. I have a couple of concerns. The cost. Who's going to pay for this? Is this going to be paid for with the Secretary of State? Are local communities going to have to pay for it? Or are you going to make the 10 voters that sign the petition pay for for this. I think it would be better if there are 10 voters that have concerns about the elections, inviting them into the process, inviting them to come count ballots ahead of time, inviting them to the testing, figuring out a way for you to alleviate their concerns about the integrity of elections, because I think if they volunteered on election day, they would see that there's a lot of safeguards built into the process and there's not as much to be concerned. Also concerned about the primary. The primary in September is very close to the general election, and we have to get the military voters' ballots over to them. And so if this creates delays after the September primary, what is the effect? Also concerned about the clerk's time on election day. My clerk gets there at 4 a.m. or a little bit earlier, and they have a lot of things to do to open up the polling place and to get polling places running. If you have one more responsibility to verify 10 voters, I'd rather them have a petition submitted earlier so that they have time not on election day. Also, many voters care about the election results. I know they, go home from voting and, quickly are looking to see who is winning in their races. And I think that the delay in election results will actually create more controversy with this. So please keep in mind those voters that care about the election night results. And with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. There was one additional person who signed up, did not indicate whether they wanted to speak or not. Is there anyone? Yeah, you didn't check any boxes out. Come on up. Come on up.
This bill, quite simply, is going to go transparency. I've heard a lot of mention about the safeguards that we have. Let me speak to a couple of things here. It's about a democratic society willing to simply corroborate itself. I've been a 7 a.m. volunteer straight through the hand count procedure. I've been to multiple testing and machine events. Right now, the New Hampshire system is set up to trust near 50% of our communities that hand count their total elections. Now we're talking about the remaining 50% left. We do not want to have any distrust in any of our machines, and by giving ourselves as citizens the right and ability to verify an election, it's a small price to pay to A, make fool out of ourselves, or at least verify what is going on. Many of you will go to your town meeting this year, you will enjoy the tradition of hand counting, community votes, you trust them. We do it repeatedly on 16, 17, 18 warrant articles. We all know some New Hampshire voting machine coding without safeguard requirements. This has happened once. It was always possible to happen another time. So this is just another safeguard to say, hey.
Why do we have, oh, I'm sorry. Has everything been okay so far then? Okay.
Yep, just continue.
Yep. We New Hampshire citizens have to trust ourselves above all others. If we wish to enjoy the convenience of machines, we should not fear our own citizens, and 100 is fine by me. I also think that was a typo. Or a percentage, as was just mentioned. This is not about making it too easy. We recognize this is going to be a difficult process, but it eliminates the idea or concept that anybody could interfere. We are outsourcing coding to companies we really don't know. I have watched the testing machine procedures. I've seen them fail, but mostly they work. However, that's a testing machine program. That is unique. It is not exactly the same as the actual running of the election. Corroborating results builds trust. To fear corroboration breeds mistrust. I have said it before, Germany and other nations hand count their entire national results. Are we less capable or less smart? I really don't think so. This bill is just simple common sense. Anyone arguing against, quite honestly, once you get past these little debates about how hard it is and who's going to pay, it's against transparency. I've been a counter, as I mentioned. The board and the State House can easily implement safeguards. Essentially, that's really all I wanted to say. I really appreciate the fact that you took time to at least entertain this. So, any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Everyone who signed up on the list has spoken. Online, there were 4 in support, 31 opposed. And with that, we'll close the public hearing and we'll open the next one in just a minute. I don't know if Senator Lang couldn't find his way back or whatever, or it's a very contentious hearing. I don't even know the subject of the bill he was introducing, so. Everybody ready? Jessica, are you ready? Okay. And we'll open the public hearing. It must be Senate Bill 212.
212. Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is David Rochefort. I'm Senator from New Hampshire Senate District 1. With respect for time, I'm not going to list off the towns that I represent because it's 20% of the state of New Hampshire by land. But before you, I have Senate Bill 212. This is a bill that was requested to put forward as a request from the Secretary of State. I think it could be probably deemed a cleanup bill. Just changes references from votes to ballots in laws regarding elections. And that's really where that, that's really all that this bill consists. I think that you have the bill in front of you. I know the Secretary of State is behind me, and I'm sure she will be happy to answer any questions that you may have on this bill.
Questions from senators? Thank you very much. Aaron.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Erin Hennessy, and I am the Deputy Secretary of State. I want to thank Senator Rochefort for putting this, what he called cleanup legislation in. It is that it cleans up language to make terms that we use in our office consistent. The purpose for this legislation is to affect the denominator for when we calculate recounts and the fees related to those. Currently, the way it's written, though, there were a few drafting errors that were done. It wasn't exactly drafted as we had requested. So I will give you that information, Mr. Chair, to clean that up if you're in
Start
favor of that.
dictating.
Okay. Okay.
And
Line,
Jessica, you have to keep good notes.
on line 9, there should not have been a change. On line 10, the first word votes should be ballots. And on page 2, line 10, it should say elected shall be less than 1% of the total ballots cast.
So let's total stand.
And change votes to ballots.
Okay, so just those 3 changes?
Yes, thank you.
And pages 3 and 4, good. Anything else you want to say?
I'm happy to take questions.
Questions from senators? Seeing none?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. There was one additional person who signed up, does not wish to speak. They are in support. And online, 2 in support, 1 opposed. And with that, we'll close the public hearing and we'll open the next one in just a minute. See if you can grab Aaron. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is James Gray, Senator from District 6, which starts up in Alton and Gilmanton and comes down Route 11 to Rochester and Stratford. Throughout the years, we've had lots of conversations about absentee voting and no excuse absentee voting and the way the statute is. So one of the things that people have talked about in this bill is the use of the word more likely than not. I don't know about you, but it's more likely than not that I'm going to go to the doctor a week from Tuesday, but I never know if they're going to cancel or whatever. It's more likely than not if my foreman comes and tells me I'm working overtime for the next 2 weeks, that I'm actually going to be working overtime for the next 2 weeks. It's more likely than not, and it is a legal term. It's not a preponderance of the evidence, but it would solve one of the things that are out there. The other stuff that's in here talks about absentee, and rewording those sections, hopefully to make it better. Secretary of State's office certainly wants to keep things on one form or one, envelope or one whatever. Certainly, I don't want to preclude that by putting all that stuff in there, but it is my idea of how to clean it up, make sure that we do get the required documentation. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Senator.
You need to turn your mic on.
Oh, yes. Oh, look at that.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Gray. So, I think the standard you bring forth here, more likely than not, is helpful to the average voter to understand their eligibility for an absentee ballot. So I appreciate that. We've had many conversations about how the system works. Our elections are safe and secure. They require people to fill out legal affidavits. Are you asking people to sort of mail in a copy of their birth certificate through the mail or a copy of their passport? I mean, that seems to create some concerns, at least for someone like me, that they need to present that, and I guess what's driving that sort of new requirement?
I think that part of what the secretary puts out when they put out their voting manual defines a lot of the things that we do in law. The voting manual is now, 8.5 by 11 sheets and it's several inches tall. So it certainly does do that. For many people in New Hampshire who were born in New Hampshire, the clerks will already be able to access the birth certificates. They have access to the vital records. The Secretary of State's office has people who can access those vital records. And I've always said that if we have the record, then why are we, worrying about other than being able to verify it through the record? Certainly the bill that I put through last time, 1337 comes to mind, but that may not be the right number. Basically says that if we've got the record, I say that, if you can tell me who signed my marriage certificate as a witness, that's a pretty good indication that you are, the right person. So there's a lot of things that we can do out there, but not to require anything is the problem that I have. Is that, a person who says, okay, I am at least 18 years of age. I am a citizen of the United States. I am domiciled in Rochester, and I am who I say I am. Just goes too far for me, and that we need, some verification that those affidavits are correct. Certainly, the bill that we passed, 1659 or 1569, whichever the number is, indicates that, that's the direction that the state has decided to go. And those kind of issues also need to be applied to, an absentee ballot, along with, going in person. So.
Thank you, Senator.
Any further questions? Very good. Thank you.
Righty. No,
Oh, you already run the whole thing? All right.
you keep going.
I don't have a list. Oh, you got the list? Okay, very good.
I forgot to bring it.
All right, thank you. So let's check that off. Dave Nelson. He's not in the room. Let's see. Oh, he wasn't speaking anyway. These look a little different than the way I get it in HHS. Let's see. Kate Horgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Kate Horgan. I'm here on behalf of the New Hampshire Association of Counties. The association is opposed to the bill, but think it can probably be quickly remedied by an amendment. Their concerns: counties operate 11 long-term care facilities and 10 county correctional facilities across the state. 80% of the people who are held at the county jails are pretrial. So they are eligible to vote via absentee ballot. I happen to be a Manchester resident. If I am sitting at the Hillsborough County Corrections Office, Superintendent Costanza is not going to allow me to go get my birth certificate from my house to go and register to vote absentee. Also, nursing homes, oftentimes those individuals do not have a photo ID. Stratford County happens to get non-governmental IDs for all of their residents. That is not the case in every county facility. Hillsborough County has a 300 bed facility. They are at about an 80% occupancy rate right now. So that could be several hundred absentee ballots. We would suggest that the committee amend the bill to allow, there's a current provision in law that allows the nursing home administrator or their designee to verify the identity of an individual. We would suggest adding that language as well as language for the superintendent. We know who these folks are. We're not holding these folks and we don't know their names or their address or where they're registered to vote. So we would just suggest if you make that small change. Also, there are concerns around the notary. If Hillsborough County is doing 400 plus absentee ballots, that could get very expensive. Coas County has 2 nursing homes. That would probably be 2 notary sessions for them. So I think if you allowed the option for the nursing home and the correction superintendent to verify identity, that would alleviate the county concerns. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Senator, you have your light on. Did you have a question?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. Senator
last
Bragg.
question. The notary thing is not required, I believe, if it's an election official that we're dealing with, right?
I read it and the legislative committee reads it to say that we would need a notary to complete the election or to complete the absentee ballot application, while election officials come to the county nursing homes. They do not come to the county correctional facilities, so there would be no election official there if that is what you are intending for that bill to do, or that portion of the bill to do. So
But
maybe
that-
just some extra clarity around that section.
That might be a different way of providing the notary thing is having who can,
Right, and I think that's what we're suggesting. If you allow the nursing home administrator and the correction superintendent or their designee to act as that voting verification ID person, I think that would alleviate our concerns.
Great.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, the next one I have is Olivia Zink.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Olivia Zink, a voter in Franklin and Executive Director of Open Democracy, a nonpartisan nonprofit. Absentee voting is also nonpartisan. According to the Institute for Responsive Government, research has shown that neither party gains any advantage for voting by absentee. Democracy thrives when every voter is able to participate. So removing barriers to participation encourages a healthy democracy. This bill would make it harder for people who are blind and don't drive, or people that don't have a driver's license to cast an absentee ballot. There are many disabled voters that do not have a driver's license. According to NCSL, Alaska, Kentucky, South Dakota, and Wisconsin are the only states that require additional ID for getting an absentee ballot. Some voters are more likely not to have easy access to documents like birth certificates or including younger voters, voters of color, and millions of married women who changed their last name, so the names maybe don't match. Yesterday was the 155th anniversary of the ratification of the 15th Amendment, prohibiting the federal government and the states to deny any citizen the right to vote based on race or color, and I believe that this would do that. Citizens don't pay much attention to politics, but if their sacred right to vote is taken away, they will get mad. So also, who pays for photocopying a driver's license? What about a 100-year-old voter who's in a wheelchair? Probably doesn't have a photocopier at their home, but needs an absentee ballot because they can't get out of their home. So then their caregiver, somebody would have to go get a photocopy. Like, what are we doing to burden those voters? So please side with voters and vote Senate Bill 113 inexpedient to legislate. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Senator Perkins Cuoco.
Yeah, thank you, Olivia. So obviously we discussed this a lot in connection with the bill just referenced by the sponsor, HB 1569 last year, but we've shown that placing these kind of burdens on registration can lead to some voter suppression, as you've indicated here. In fact, I think we saw with a similar law to 1569 in Kansas, a 10% sort of suppression of the vote. So can you speak to whether there have been any problems that are unaddressed in New Hampshire that this bill would sort of seek to clean up?
Not that I am aware of. I think that there is a narrative out there, and I think that there's some misinformation. But I think in New Hampshire, our election workers are heroes, and they do a really good job to make sure that all eligible voters are voting. And I think by and large, they're really doing the yeoman's work, and the laws that we have on the books are protecting voters. So I don't think we need additional burdens like notarization. I know when I registered to vote, my city clerk required the physical copy, the original birth certificate, not the photocopy of the birth certificate. So this says a copy of your birth certificate. I would love to sort of make that clarity so that people could bring a copy for all different things and not just a different standard for absentee. But I think we have to think about people who are blind, people who maybe are 100 years old and wheelchair bound or homebound, or getting Meals on Wheels. They're not all voters have the same access to all of these things, and it's not that they're. And I understand that Senator Gray's concern is that there's no standards. So I think that what we should do is sort of think about what are some standards that would make the system a little more secure, but not going so far as a notary for the application or all the other documents. And also consider maybe military voters. Say somebody is overseas fighting to protect our democracy and doesn't have access to a document. What happens in that situation? Is that individual now denied their right to vote because they don't have all of those documents when they're overseas fighting to protect this country? I think we do need to sort of think about this bill and all the ramifications, such as Kate spoke about, those that are incarcerated or in nursing homes. We need to think about all voters. Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Michael O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Michael O'Brien. I'm with Party Strategies representing America Votes here today in opposition to this bill. A lot of what I was going to say has been said. Just want to reiterate, oftentimes for absentee ballots, you're looking at a pretty vulnerable population of people who use them. And so by putting extra requirements, you could very easily be denying someone the access to the absentee ballot they need in order to vote. In reference to Senator Perkins-Polka's stats in Kansas, when they passed a citizenship requirement, they had it in place for 2 years. 30,000 voters, or 12% of the voters who attempted to register, were turned away. Of those, almost every single, over 99.9% of voters were found to be U.S. citizens. So almost 30,000 people were denied access to registration to find out that they shouldn't have been in the first place. This is a real concern. Requiring a notary for folks is a real concern. That is not an easy thing for some folks to access. And so as we think about the vulnerable populations that have been talked about here today, I think it is important to keep them in mind as we think about what our next steps here are. To my knowledge, there has never been a case of someone else casting an absentee ballot for somebody. So, we've heard, I've been in front of this committee and others for over a decade now and have long heard stories of the concern of someone going to a mailbox and waiting for the mail and taking someone's ballot. It's never happened. It is a fallacy that does not exist. And so I struggle with what this bill is attempting to do. I do want to reiterate, though, that I do appreciate the more likely than not standard that is put here, because I do feel that voters oftentimes worry about, well, I think I'm not going to be gone, but maybe I'll be there, and they don't want to do the wrong thing. And so we do appreciate that as well. And do want to add that in there. So happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Got any questions? Senator Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, it certainly would not address all of your issues, but has, with the county, like county jails and nursing home administration, are you okay with them verifying the person?
Sure. So I haven't really, I don't know those particular issues from what the counties and nursing homes are dealing with. What I will say is any way in which we can continue to make sure that folks have the access to the ballot is important. But we don't support, sort of large requirements that are going to stop folks from being able to access their right to vote, especially in the absence of a real problem being identified. Again, this system has been in place now, it must be right over 15 years, and I've never seen someone cast an absentee ballot for somebody else. It's just not a thing that we're aware that happens.
Follow up, if I may, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman?
absolutely.
So the data on Kansas, is there data on the types of people, the 30,000 that you had mentioned?
So
Is there
this
data
was
on what-
a similar requirement to 1569 than this. right? So the bill that was passed last year, it's the reason the courts have continuously struck down citizenship requirements. It's another thing here. We're in the middle of, litigating obviously a case around citizenship requirements being used. Courts have consistently said you cannot require citizenship because passports take too long to get or are too expensive. Senator Gray is right that it can be fairly easy for someone who lives in New Hampshire to get an updated record, although it does come with a cost. However, as we know about the New Hampshire population, most folks who live in New Hampshire aren't originally from New Hampshire. So that actually doesn't solve the problem for most of the folks who live here and call this home.
Thank you.
Any Senator Perkins Cuoco?
Sorry, one last question, Chair. Has there been any instance of the Attorney General needing to investigate someone in New Hampshire for use of a citizenship affidavit that has proven that person not to be a citizen?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Thank you.
Nope. All right. Any other questions for Mr. O'Brien? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's the end of my list. Is there anyone else that would like to speak that did not sign up? All right, I don't see anything with that. I'm going to close the hearing on Senate Bill 213.
In a minute or two, we will take a motion to go into executive session.
Yeah.
Is everybody ready? Okay, do I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Have a motion to go into executive session. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? When ayes have it, we are in executive session. Going right down the list, Senate Bill 11.
Mr. Chair.
Under
I move ITL on Senate Bill 11.
Senate Bill 11, we have a motion for ITL. And I will second that. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and I will take that one out. Senate Bill 16.
Mr. Chair, I move OTP on Senate Bill 16.
OTP on Senate Bill 16.
Chair, I just had a note in my notes that we were going to clarify that the 2 locations were to include the website. I don't think it's a terribly important amendment. And then we were going to clarify 30 or 60 days, sort of a timeline for which the results should be left up. I don't know if either one's something we can just do via committee amendment today.
The pull up my stuff here. The 2 places, what did you want to change it to?
I just had in my notes from the hearing that we were going to clarify.
I did have a discussion with Senator Rochford about the 2 places, and the 2 places, could be City Hall and either the library, the fire station, front and back doors, City Hall. I don't know that we want to go to the police car, post it on the back. But
It looks like the change I had noted in the hearing was on line 6 to simply say, have it read, the town clerk shall post copies in the 2 places where municipality regularly posts notices of its governing body meetings, comma, which may include the municipality's main website and any social media accounts utilized. So it was just a clarification. I don't know if that, to be responsive to our hearing.
The language that's in there is pretty much the standard language that we put in, so coming out of RSA 91A.
So I think the question is, and now that I'm rereading this and remembering the hearing better, the question is the word and, right? It makes 4 places.
Correct.
That it's required,
Correct.
right? By using the word and, it has to be put in 2 places and on the website and on the social media account.
Correct.
And so I think the question is, do we want to clarify that, saying the 2 places could include the website and the social media?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say.
So I think if we wanted, the language I think that might work again is what you said was where it says in the 2 places the municipality regular posts notices on its governing body meetings, which may include the municipality's main website and the social media accounts. I think that would.
Okay.
Does that resolve the issue, I think?
I do think so.
We take out and on and put in which may include.
And one more comma, governing body meetings, comma, which may include the municipality's main website and any social media accounts utilized by the municipality.
I are an engineer.
My class grammarian from 8th grade is showing. So if you guys are amenable, I'll just move that as a committee amendment.
And I'll second that.
Jessica, do you have that down?
I do.
Okay. And that's as a committee amendment, all right. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. And we didn't put the last one on consent.
let's finish this.
We didn't put this one on consent yet.
We haven't
either.
voted on this one yet. We have to vote on the bill as
The
amended.
bill as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Move consent.
Second,
Actually, we don't need seconds in the committee. That's per Tammy. Tammy, well, an example would be when I introduce a bill and I say I move the bill. There is no second because it's not required. And that's the example she told me. So technically, we don't need, it's normally done, but we don't have to.
if we missed it, it wouldn't invalidate it. How's that?
Okay. So this one is mine. Does anybody else want to take one out?
We need a vote on consent.
I can take SB 16 out. Happy to.
Okay.
Did
And
we
we're
move
gonna
consent
look at
on 16?
consent instead.
So I move,
moved
Rebecca moved
consent.
consent,
Okay,
I second
all
it, we just need to vote on it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's on consent.
Mr. Chair, I move consent on Senate Bill 11.
We have a motion for consent on Senate Bill 11. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. It is on consent. All right.
Mr. Chair, I'd move OTP on Senate Bill 43.
Senate Bill 43, OTP.
And I have an amendment to that, which has been distributed to the committee.
Yep.
Speak to the amendment.
And that is Amendment 2025-0239S.
Correct. I speak to the amendment.
Yep.
So again, this amendment, I worked with the Secretary of State's office. This is the language they requested. So this is a wipe and replace of Section 1 to clean up wear in particular. And again, it just says that if I'm wearing a Harris button or a Trump button and I'm walking through voting, as long as I'm actively voting, or as they say, expeditiously voting, then that wouldn't be cause to throw a voter out of the polling place.
Thank you, Senator. I wanted to comment that I do think the amendment is an improvement on the bill. For my part, I still believe we shouldn't be wearing campaign clothing into the polling place, so I'll probably still vote no on the underlying bill, but we do appreciate the improvement.
And we do remember that there's a Supreme Court case on this. That's why I'm bringing the bill forward. The Supreme Court says that wearing a shirt is a First Amendment privilege as long as you're not.
An expression of your First Amendment rights.
Yep.
Yep. And whether we like it or not.
Right.
All right. So we have the amendment. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? All right. All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. And now we have the bill as amended. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it. And Senator Lang
take it out.
gets to take it out. Is there an objection to consent?
Well, it's a 3-2, right?
It can go on consent.
Oh, it could still go on consent in theory, yeah.
No objection to consent.
Move consent.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. It is on consent. All right.
Mr. Chair,
Um,
I'd move OTP on Senate Bill
45.
45.
And on 45, you also received an amendment.
I do not believe I have a copy of the amendment for 45.
Should be amendment 2025-0169F.
Uh-huh.
Do you have it
Yeah,
in your package?
I do.
I don't have it, but that's okay.
Well, some of the senators don't have copies, so if you go out and make a copy, and we'll come back to 45 in a minute.
Oh, 169 is.
0169S.
Senate Bill 104, FN. Chair will move ITL.
You're moving ITL on SB 45?
104.
Oh, I thought you were in 45.
We're
We're-
waiting for copies.
Yeah.
We're going to move on to a different bill.
Okay. Second.
Okay.
ITL
ITL,
on 104.
made by me, seconded by Senator Perkins Cuoco. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Move consent.
We have a motion for consent. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And I will take that one out also. And for the only reason we're holding 212 is so that you can resolve the rest of your questions with Secretary of State's office.
Okay,
That's the one changing votes to ballots.
Got it.
and all that.
I can always do that via floor amendment if Aaron is on board, but I'm happy to do it here as well.
It's up to you, Senator. You're the one with the questions.
Well,
so.
you are the chair.
It would require a committee amendment anyway.
That's fine.
So
I will-
holding it till next week is probably the easiest way,
I will work to
to
get
do
it
that.
resolved by next week.
and you'll include the amendments that we had today
Correct,
from Aaron,
correct.
okay? Absentee voting, we'll hold that one for resolution. Number of polling stations, that one needs work. Certainly we'll engage with Senator Murphy on maybe a list of criteria that they have to meet or something, to be able to do that. Land impact, we're holding on that.
Did you want to act on SB 42?
There was, yeah, I don't see any reason why we can't. Okay,
I'll move OTP on SB 42.
OTP from
Second.
Senator Perkins Cuoco, seconded by Senator Lang. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Okay,
Move consent.
have a motion for consent.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And we're on consent. Senator Perkins Cuoco.
Sure.
All right. As soon as he gets back with the copies, we'll do 45. And maybe he doesn't know about the copier in your office.
Well done. We'll have 5 bills left that we still have to exec. 44, 46, 103, 212, and 213.
I think that's right. On the ID stuff, when certainly, you know, my mantra for election law is easy to vote, hard to cheat. And certainly we want to find a way, the clerks, whether it's in Stratford County, whether it's a Dover clerk or a Rochester clerk or a Stratford clerk or whatever, fills a lot of those requirements, and that certain identity verifications have been done by either the nursing home or the jail or prison or whatever, and I don't have problems with that. Having the other people do the verification causes me some problem, okay? And having the clerk actually show up at the nursing home, the prison, or a designee, someone, deputy, clerk, because in Rochester, a lot of times they'll hire a couple of extra people part-time before the elections, and they'll actually be the ones that go out to the nursing homes and other things. So I think there's a way to get there and resolve the concerns that were expressed. But, in the past, I have put forward bills that said, well, if you're there with your relative, husband, wife, daughter, son, mother, father, that you could verify them, because if it's you do the wrong thing, I don't mind coming after you legally, but that has not received a good reception. So expanding that to other people other than the ones that are in law right now causes me some problem because of past experience. So. You can certainly email it to me, but I think I know what it says. And I think Senator.
No, I got one. It's
Everybody
for
else?
Yep, we're
45.
all set. Yep.
Okay. So during the testimony and my conversations with the AG, they didn't like my 10 feet within the property line. And they also didn't like my sign size requirement. I took that out. They didn't like me putting in the thing about the local governments, so I took that out. So the main thing that this bill does right now is up in that first section where it clarifies and puts it into two sentences so there's no ambiguity between prohibiting on private property and public property. Okay, so with private property, if you have the owner's consent, you're good to go. On public property, you can't do it unless it's a right of way, and then you have to be the person that owns the land over which the right of way passes, which is existing state law. So if that's good for you, I'll move on to pass.
Just one question for you, Chair. So we heard from the ACLU in hearing that, any regulation here needs to be narrowly tailored to the public interest. And so do you feel like your conversation with the AG was to reflect the concerns raised? They seem to.
As best that I can, okay? The thing that we are clarifying in here is that private property, you have to have the owner's consent, and that's statute anywhere. This just clarifies that, political signs would also be included in there, and then, the right-of-way stuff, so, and I'll also move the amendment to 250169S. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. the bill as amended. All those in favor, or is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Okay.
You're not, okay, well, I can write it down either way. Okay,
Move consent.
we have a motion for consent. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And all opposed, it's on consent, and I'll take this one out too.
All right.
All right. Any other discussion that any of you want to have?
Need to come out of exec.
We have a motion to come out of executive. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Our business of the day being complete, we are adjourned.